All right, here we are. We're in the final stretch. You've almost made it. This is the second to last lecture for our series on the EU AI Act. So hang in there, we're almost done, and then we can get finished with the rest of this domain. In this lecture, we're going to be talking about deployer obligations. Looking at this list, you're going to see a lot of familiar terms and phrases, and so I think this is going to be pretty straightforward for us. Under the EU AI Act, deployer obligations include AI literacy, due diligence, compliance and monitoring, human oversight, incident reporting, transparency, record keeping, cooperation with authorities, and a new term for us, fundamental rights impact assessment, or FRIA. For AI literacy, we've already discussed this in a previous lecture, and so I'm not going to rehash this here. If you want to review AI literacy, of course, you can go back to that lecture and rewatch it. Concerning due diligence, deployers are not subject to the same distributor or importer requirements. Deployers that are public authorities, EU institutions, bodies, offices, or agencies must verify that the AI system is registered in the database. Concerning compliance and monitoring, deployers must monitor according to the provider's instructions. They must provide feedback to the provider as necessary. And if the system's use results in a risk to health, safety, or fundamental rights, the deployer must inform the provider and/or distributor, the relevant market surveillance authority, and suspend use of the system. Deployers are also required to carry out a DPIA as required by the GDPR. Responsibility for human oversight must be assigned to a competent natural person. Deployers may create their own resources and activities to carry this out, and they must ensure that the input data is relevant and representative, and that input data can be controlled as required, for example, with a meta prompt or some type of content filter. Concerning incident reporting, if a serious incident occurs, the deployer must immediately inform the provider, importer and distributor, and relevant market surveillance authority. With regards to transparency, when deploying a system in the workplace, employer deployers must inform affected workers and their representatives. Those representatives, for example, may include union officials. And natural persons must be informed concerning the system's use when it affects fundamental rights. For example, if a system is being used considering promotion, for example. On the topic of record keeping, when processing personal data, logs must be retained for a period appropriate to the intended purpose. That could be, for example, at least 6 months or as otherwise indicated by national law or the GDPR. Concerning cooperation with authorities, deployers must cooperate with the EU AI Act implementation activities. Deployers of biometric ID systems must submit an annual report to market surveillance authorities and DPAs. And finally, in this and the next slide, we're going to be talking about the FRIAs, or Fundamental Rights Impact Assessments. This is a deployer responsibility, not a provider responsibility. This is one of those sneaky little things that I think that could make their way into the exam. And so this is one of those nuances I think you should commit to memory. And perhaps one reason why it's a deployer responsibility is because it's the deployers that determine the specific use cases. Fundamental rights impact assessments must be performed on systems that are listed in Article 6.2. This includes the BC MEAL high-risk systems that we looked at earlier, as well as public law entities, private operators of public services, for example, in education and healthcare, and private deployers that evaluate creditworthiness, as well as risk and pricing for life and health insurance. Concerning the contents of a fundamental rights impact assessment, they must include the following: description of the system's use and intended purpose, frequency and period of use, the natural persons and groups likely affected, the specific risks and those risks' mitigations, the human oversight measures implemented, as well as the governance and compliance mechanisms. Some final notes on fundamental rights impact assessments. They are only required for the system's first use. They must be current. They may leverage provider and/or other AI operator documentation, for example, a DPIA, and market surveillance authorities must be notified of the results. In this lecture, we went over deployer obligations. The list includes AI literacy, due diligence, compliance and monitoring, human oversight, incident reporting, transparency and information, record keeping, cooperation with authorities, and conducting fundamental rights impact assessments. I think the main unique obligation here is definitely the FRIA, so keep that in mind as you prepare for the exam.